Good evening, Colonel Parr. This is Cadet Bermudez. I have with me Cadet Wilbers, and we will be talking about our capstone project, Pilot Training Next Experimental. As you can see on the screen, we have 4 other cadets with us and 3 advisors, Lieutenant Colonel Tossel from the BS Department, Major Graham, CS40's AOC, and Lieutenant Seach from the BS Department as well. This is just a standard Air Force overview about what we're going to talk about today. Also, if you look at the top of the slides, we have our stakeholders, obviously the Air Force Academy. We have Airmanship Next, which is a program that's new to the airfield or new to the Academy. Lockheed Martin, Acme Worldwide, and AETC.
So on this slide, we're talking about the overall idea of what Pilot Training Next is here at the Academy. So essentially, AETC stood up this project a couple years back because they wanted to tackle some of the up-and-coming ideas behind training and how the Air Force can train better, whether that be in virtual reality and tackling these ideas of the whole Learning Next principle from the AETC Commander General Webb. So PTN's goal, broad idea here, is that we want to finish pilots, push them through pilot training in about 180 days. And that 180 days coincides with the max time limit for a TDY, which essentially would save, so we're told, a lot of money with the idea of PCSing pilots to their respective bases. If they can accomplish this in 180 days and only have to TDY to that base, that saves the Air Force a lot of money. The other goals behind PTN is just cost-effective and reduced flying. So that means utilizing these technologies that we have that are coming off the shelf in engineering world, as well as reducing the amount of flying time that's necessary for pilots to get through pilot training, i.e. saving a lot of money. We want to cut down on operational costs, like I said, to include flying, maintenance, and other support sites at these training bases, as well as incorporating, like I said, the whole Learning Next goal into Air Force training operations. Pilot Training Next is one of the first and beginning ways that Learning Next is being incorporated, and it's going to continue to grow into the maintenance field, into all kinds of other fields across the Air Force. And lastly, we want to build virtual reality's capabilities here in the Air Force as a training aid to be used, like I said, in these many other dimensions. And the big idea behind virtual reality as well is that we have yet to determine what virtual reality's status in training is going to be. Is it going to be an aid? Is it going to be a supplement, or is it going to be a complete replacement? So how that pertains to pilot training is this going to be a tool that people can use post-flight to jump in and see the mistakes that they made? Or is this going to be an idea where we completely replace a flight in an aircraft for a flight in virtual reality? So here at the Academy with PT and X, our whole idea is that we want to do some operational testing with what is going on at the Academy. We have, as Howard said, the SOFA airmanship programs, which work here up in Fairchild, and those same people get to learn first in a virtual reality environment and then try to transfer those skills down at the airfield, flying in the powered flight program. So we want to evaluate the methods and training procedures that go along with training in virtual reality, as well as the idea for us on the 5th floor, as you've seen in our workspace, is that we want to become a test bed for the Air Force and for Pilot Training Next, the actual big Air Force program, is because we only have one system and we're surrounded by a team of research-minded individuals. And so this test bed allows us to incorporate new training methods, new software, new equipment, whatever the case may be, and test it here at the Academy first before implementing it at Pilot Training Next. And this really helps Pilot Training Next because we have an unobtrusive approach to what is going on at pilot training. They have their mission that they're trying to succeed at every day, and they shouldn't have to be focused on the research side of improving their program. That responsibility can fall to other organizations. And lastly, the biggest piece that we want to incorporate is the testing of using motion cueing with our motion seat to determine if it can change or have an effect on virtual reality sickness, as is shown in the picture on the far right of the slide. So, the big scope of our project ultimately derives from what our stakeholders who are in this project hope for us to get out of it. So our first piece, which coincides with what's going on in Mr. Tom Jack's office, the USAFA Airmanship Program, is operational testing evaluation. So we want to be able to leverage these programs that are going on here at USAFA to study and prove the concepts of virtual reality training and other ideas behind what goes into user interfaces and virtual reality to see if and prove these concepts that are going on. And so the programs that are going on here at USAFA include, in Mr. Tom Jack's office, include AV302, which is kind of the big program that we are using and looking at, which includes 10 lessons on the second floor of Fairchild getting virtual reality training, as well as 10 additional lessons down at the airfield where these people can hopefully transfer what they've learned in virtual reality to the airfield. And we really want to see that before and after effect to try and capture both subjective and objective data on their progress. Nextly, Lockheed Martin. So our main representative there is Dr. Odin down in Orlando, Florida. Um, and his kind of whole buy-in to our project is we want to leverage him to help understand the negative effects of virtual reality. Lockheed Martin has a lot of people in their corporation that we can use to leverage to help us design experiments or try to improve the virtual reality experience. And another big piece of this coming from Lockheed Martin includes adaptable versus adaptive training. So, adaptive training is this new and up and coming idea of learning whereby we are using an intelligent tutoring system to orchestrate the interaction of the pilot with the computer. And essentially, the tutor, quote unquote, would customize a learning activity to these students to help them increase their learning capacity and help them improve in the program. So, for example, if a certain student is struggling with maintaining certain airspeeds or maintaining certain headings or altitudes when they're flying in a virtual reality environment, the tutor can analyze that, understand what the student is wrong, tailor the difficulty as is necessary for the student to practice and master those concepts in the virtual reality environment before proceeding to the plane. Acme Worldwide, like I said before, their whole buy-in to this project is focused on reducing and eliminating virtual reality sickness with the use of their motion cueing seat, which is in our test lab. And the big idea there that they suggest is because virtual reality sickness is a very prevalent issue, especially when you're moving up in fighters and higher difficulty aircraft, they suggest that the addition of initial motion that responds to an aircraft's inputs in the virtual reality environment will partially or wholly negate the effects of simulator sickness. And lastly, AETC, their whole buy-in here is that we are providing research for them from the Academy and our associates at Air Force Research Lab aid actual Air Force operations.
So, in order for us to help test and figure out if our experiment is good or not, we need to come up with a research question as well as a hypothesis. So ultimately, we want to find out if the Airmanship Next program, which is on the second floor of Fairchild with the um, VR training, is an effective method to train pilots. We have talked to PTN graduates, and they have gone on to fly fighters, and so far we've heard that it's been good. But at the same time, how does it affect the training at the Air Force Academy? We have aircraft that are not as difficult, but at the same time, if we can get them started in learning airmanship or things that regarding airmanship that you can't learn later on, might as well get them started here. So when they get into harder aircraft, they already have a sense of airmanship developed in their time here. And also, like we mentioned before, positive and negatives of VR, and ultimately is adding the motion cueing in a prevent or eliminate, reduce whatever word you want to use with VR sickness. So our hypothesis, based on some research, is that since Airmanship Next or VR training allows students and pilots to practice maneuvers unlimited amount of times, not having to worry about gas, not worried about weather, not worried about any money involved in flying, that it'll improve their skills significantly. Excuse that, sir. So it's going to help them improve skills because they can practice anytime they want, as long as they have the sim going and not having to be in an actual aircraft. Because here at the airfield or at the academy, we can't fly at night. So people, once they're wanting to take a break from homework, they're able to actually hone in their skills and practice their skills. So the next day when they show up to the airfield, they have worked on something they're deficient in. And ultimately, with this extra practice, not at the airfield, it'll be a short amount of time for them to be able to solo. Ultimately, that's one of the goals is being able to fly the aircraft by yourself. So giving them extra practice and not worrying about the gas. Hopefully, it's going to take them less flights to solo. And ultimately, with the motion share, it's going to alleviate the simulator sickness. We don't know if it's going to, or our guess is that it's not going to eliminate it or prevent it. It's just going to reduce it. People are still going to inherently get sick because even if in an aircraft, there is motion there and they still get sick. So we're just saying that without motion, you're going to get a lot more sick than if you had motion. And as I was mentioning before, we have had some previous research on this, and studies before have said that motion in VR training, it doesn't eliminate it, doesn't prevent it, it just reduces it. And we're gonna basically these tests that we're gonna do is confirming that. And if it works out that way, so be it. If not, then we'll show and prove it with our data.
So the current state of where we're at right now is we're doing a lot of prep work for the numerous tasks that we want to accomplish in the next semester. Um, so right now, just some examples. We're working on building a T6 and soon to be T53 model in Prepare 3D, which is the Lockheed Martin software for our flight simulators. We're finalizing and getting very detailed with what we want to do for our experimental processes. So that includes writing up run books, writing down our procedures, and essentially just writing out a script of how we want each experiment to work. We're working on software kinks pertaining to both the prepared 3D flight models and our motion seat, trying to make prepared and our motion seats computers softwares play nice with each other. Um, as well, we're also in the process of um, essentially an acquisition process here in our department. We're trying to acquire from either Lockheed Martin, either from the Air Force's dollar. We're trying to build our own kit upstairs in the B-side department, like I said, so we can have our own test bed to try these new technologies out. And lastly, kind of one of the other big things that um, we're in the works on is that we want to determine what the right mix of virtual reality to flying is. So that coincides with when and where in the student's training syllabus should virtual reality fit? Should it be in the very early stages? Should it be in the middle, or should it be in the very end of the stages to reinforce those learning concepts of flying? Um, so an end goal that we want to have towards the end of this semester and beyond is we want to have a working simulator and a virtual reality kit on the fifth floor, like I said. Um, we want to conduct experiments and determine the results of what motion has on what effect motion has on virtual reality flying and preventing sickness from that. We want to provide suggestions to pilot training next down in at Randolph Air Force Base on what they could possibly improve versus, for example, like what in their simulator could they possibly change? What in their syllabus could they possibly change? When and where should we teach these concepts, certain concepts about flying, like task management or situational awareness? Should we try to tackle those in the virtual reality environment or in the flying environment? We hope to do that. And lastly, we want to do a whole data analysis of things that we've collected up to this point, to include survey data as well as analyzing students' grade cards throughout their flying training experiences. Um, and lastly, kind of another end goal is utilizing um, augmented reality. It's kind of more of a something that we want to make happen, but we don't know if we can at this moment. But if we could incorporate virtual reality, or excuse me, augmented reality, we want to incorporate features like having the trainee be able to interact with their environment a little easier. So they could interact with the virtual environment by adjusting radio settings, adjusting altimeter settings, flipping landing gear. And these training principles that they learn in the virtual reality environment, we think would be a great way for training transfer to the actual aircraft to be maximized and improve that performance. Because if they can practice it in the virtual reality environment and know exactly what it's going to be like, then they're more prepared when they get to the plane.
One other thing about augmented reality is we've gotten some feedback from people that have gone through pilot training next at Randolph and said that they want to be able to use their knee board to be able to take notes or see like their mission profile throughout the sortie itself. And with the VR, they're not able to really do that. They would have to lift up their headset and then kind of look down, take their notes or look at their notes, and then put the headset back. We want to be able to ease that transition of them just getting in the habit of looking down and then looking back up instead of having to lift up a headset. And we believe that augmented reality will be able to do that. All right, for our approach and experimental design, this is what we have at this moment. There's still a work in progress, but this is what we kind of have right now. So for our motion experiment, it's going to be a 2-day process. We obviously need to take into account cadets because most of our participants are going to be cadets. And we know that everyone's busy, so we want to take up just about 50 minutes of their time on the first day and then 10 minutes on the second. So the way we've structured the test itself is there's going to be multiple scenarios and they're going to fit into 4 different ones. So approximately we can get 40. I think we'll be successful, 10 per each scenario. So for one scenario on the first day, let's say they do the motion aspect of our scenario where we're going to try to make them go through different maneuvers, test it out and see if they get sick or not. And then with the motion seat, we'll see if it works. And then after that, they'll take a questionnaire, which if you look to the left or in the middle of the slides, they have the different symptoms that we're going to ask them to rate we're going to actually ask them before they do their scenario and the motion, and then afterwards also to see if it's changed, and then basically throughout that first day and into the second day as well, where we see if there's any onset of symptoms after the fact. So going back into the actual scenarios they'll be doing. So they'll have one motion scenario, take the symptom questionnaire, and they'll get into either an adaptable or an adaptive training scenario. After that, they'll go into a VFR overhead pattern, which we've given them basically an adaptable or adaptive portion. We've given them the practice to do whatever they need to do to be successful in the overhead pattern. So for this, our goal is to just see how effective adaptable or adaptive training is. We're going to have some measures that they're going to be subject to and see how closely or how far away they are from those measures. And after that, that's going to be the end of their first day of testing. And then they come back in 24 hours or 48 hours, depending on their schedule. And then we're going to test them in the opposite, which is going to be no motion. So same scenario as their first one, but this one's going to be no motion. And then as you can see in our chart on the slides, this is kind of like the 4 different tracks each participant can have. And like I mentioned before, simulator sickness questionnaires will be one of our measures to basically compare and contrast the effects of the motion seat and not motion seat. So we're going to administer them as quick or as often as possible, and we're just basically going to compare the two. And I forget if I mentioned this before, but let's say for the symptom, we're going to ask, hey, how's your general discomfort? They're going to rate it between 0 and 3, and then we're just going to add that up and then compare across the four different scenarios. And something else that I wanted to talk about too when we were setting up the scenarios, this relates to human-computer interaction, is our difficulty setting up our VR environment. As you can see on the picture on the bottom left of the slides, that's where we recently moved it to, because in our first place we were having in the other corner of the classroom and the lights were over there. So we were told that since VR signals are using IR, we needed to limit our IR exposure. So we had to go to a section of the classroom where we turned off the lights, or basically loosened the light bulb so there's no light going through and interrupting our VR signal. So by the time we had that, we were able to have not much problems regarding the VR signal to the computer, as well as sometimes when we would put on the headset, when we would calibrate it to our P3D software, we would be like way too high in the cockpit. So we would have to press the recalibrate button to ensure that we are seated properly in where we want to be in the cockpit, not too high, not too low, so we could be as realistic as possible. So for our project, these are some of the things that we would measure. We would measure a success by the end of this next semester, is being able to gather up as much data as possible from the different individuals at the academy that go through the programs or the airmanship programs we have, either downstairs with Mr. Tom Jack on the second floor, where they do the VR training and then transfer over to powered flight, or just powered flight in general. We're going to ask for these grade cards as well, as you can see on the top right, where we have grade cards from people going through the AV302 VR training program, and then we have people just going through the regular powered flight with no experience, and then we're just going to compare and contrast the two to see if there's any difference. Like within the first 4 flights, what's the on the first flight, what are their skill levels? Is the person that went through the VR program significantly better, slightly better, or are they the same? We're going to try to figure that out with the data. And additionally, it's like the motion questionnaires I mentioned previously. We're going to see how much the motion seat actually helps. If it's just individual, if it's actually helping, we're going to use those questionnaires to figure out if how it actually affects, or how the motion chair actually affects VR simulator sickness. And also, just for a point of pride for us, getting the motion chair to set up and actually function with the P3D software. We have been working all semester long on trying to get this chair to work, and we've thought we got it, or we were initially told it's literally just plugging an Ethernet port from the computer with the software and to the motion seat. We tried that, it did not work, and we got a plug-in from Acme Worldwide, who makes the chair, and we thought it was just going to be as simple as dragging, dropping, letting them interact, and it's not like that too. So once we get this chair fully set up, that's honestly one of our measures of success, because something that we've been working on all semester finally got it to work, as well as adaptive versus adaptable training. This is one of the biggest parts of our project is figuring out the difference, or the success or effectiveness of adaptive versus adaptable training. Dr. Odin from Lockheed Martin has asked us, this is what I want you to work on, aside from finding out negative effects of VR, because this helps them and helps ultimately the Air Force try to figure out if how do we progress in training our pilots, training our maintainers, training anyone? Is it going to be through adaptive or adaptable training? And then I sort of mentioned this before, is motion really going to make a big difference? If not, it's not worth the Air Force to buy the motion seats. It's more just, okay, either suck it up or just limit your VR exposure at times, but still make sure that you have enough in there so you're getting the proper training.
So our perfect world scenario here is what we envision and what would be ideal for us if we had unlimited money. Excuse me, if we had unlimited money in our project to build it. So what we want to address here is that this is what we could build with unlimited money, unlimited time into our project. So that means incorporating top of the line virtual reality headsets and eye tracking technology that we can use in future studies moving forward, as well as acquiring other equipment um, to get more objective measures pertaining like physiological measures um, and some other things about what the student is actually doing in the kit. Just some more objective measures that we could use possibly to get a better understanding during analysis. Um, as we've said before, we would like to incorporate augmented reality technology because we believe that, as I said before, giving the student the most realistic scenario in the virtual reality environment, we think would be the best way to transfer those skills to the airplane. And that coincides with the better VR headset as well. So we have higher fidelity and better graphics so that the person in the VR headset doesn't have to squint and look at things. They can just look down, recognize their airspeed, and keep moving. And the idea behind this augmented reality, like Howard said, was incorporating a knee board, like shown in the bottom picture there. Um, the idea would be that the pilot looks down, and the virtual reality, because there's cameras on the headset, creates kind of a meshed picture of what they're looking at in their on their legs, on their knee board, so they can take notes, as well as still seeing what's going on in the virtual reality environment. Um, Additionally, if we wanted to incorporate like sensors on the hands as well for the person in the virtual reality environment to interact with the plane, that would be another step forward. But again, these things take a lot of money and a lot of time to develop. Um, and doing that as well allows students to interact with the instruments that are in the plane as well, leading to better transfer into the aircraft. Um, Next, we want to figure out and determine the perfect ideal setting for how much motion is necessary in the seat to hopefully prevent um, motion sickness because of the virtual reality environment. So, students, if they are flying, they're banking, they're pushing pitch up or down in their aircraft in the virtual environment, these reactions from the seat hopefully give enough benefit to their environmental experience so that they cannot become sick because of virtual reality. Um, and then lastly, uh, the ideal kit, as we've discussed with Lieutenant Colonel Gunn, who is the program manager down at Randolph Air Force Base, is ideally they don't want their kits to be above any more than $10,000. And that includes all the software, all the hardware as well. Um, and these kits as well, for the most part, they're pretty compact spaces, and they want to keep them that way so that they can be moved around and hopefully, as they are now, continue to be implemented in the trainees' houses so that even after their workday, if something's just really bugging them or if they want to practice, they can go sit down behind their couch and continue to practice these maneuvers and reinforce these concepts.
We're running out a little bit of time here, but I just wanted to talk about relevant impact to the Department of Defense. We've touched on this aspect throughout the entire presentation, but I wanted to just reiterate. We obviously have first of all, we obviously have a growing pilot shortage in the Air Force, and we've been trying to figure out ways to fill those gaps, and obviously getting pilots to graduate quicker and get to their airframes in a faster time frame. It's going to help that for sure. We get them through less than 180 days, um, get into their B school, and then they're going to be able to fly those missions as quicker than it would be traditionally. Obviously, with VR training, it's going to be cheaper than flying in an actual aircraft. You don't have to worry about gas. You have to worry about upfront costs. But ultimately, if we can get these programs, these ARs, the VRs, or to be as beneficial as possible, then we can get them practiced up, trained up, and ready to go quicker. And one aspect though, with the impact of trying to get them to their airframes as quickly as possible is what type of airmanship skills do they miss out on. They, for some of the first PTN graduates, they have skipped out on the T-38, which is usually the trainer that gets them trained up to fly fighters or bombers. So if we just get them straight into flying a T-6, one sortie every 2 VR sorties, what are they going to miss out on that? So we want to be able to maybe try to figure things like that, or analyze those scenarios and try to propose an idea of like maybe getting 180 days may not be the best idea to do. I had mentioned before, you don't have to worry about gas, and at the same time, this is the last thing that we've been talked to about for our project here at the Academy for our capstone. Is they're going to start this program their 4-degree year. Their second semester, they're going to get them into a VR training, and then our VR training environment. The next year after that, if they like it, they're going to give them more classes, and they're going to get them to powered flight quicker. And after that, they'll get them to powered flight. And then after powered flight, they'll come back and be an instructor in those VRs. And then maybe if they're waiting for UPT, they come back and then they're instructing again to other cadets while they're lieutenants waiting to go to UPT. So they're increasing their airmanship skills throughout their 4 years here. So by the time they get to UPT, they've gained something instead of just not being as prepared as traditionally we've had some cadets just go to UPT. So ultimately, we think that this program will help the Department of Defense and Air Force fix their pilot shortage, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're not rushing them through pilot training and missing out on necessary skills. Jake, you got anything else for this last part? Awesome. This is just a question slide, so Colonel Parr, if you have any questions, just email us or we'll talk in class. Thank you very much, sir.